Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate coming to you live from the state of Maine and also a state of extreme exhaustion, having been in New Jersey for the 4th of July weekend. We'll get into all that. But also, we got Brian, of course, inevitably in the state of Rhode Island. Brian, what's the good word this week?
Nothing too crazy. I have some thoughts on our nation's 250th anniversary. But, I'm dying to hear about how your trip to Rhode Island or New Jersey was.
Well, that's funny because I'm really curious to know how I'm coming into this totally blind. So I'm looking forward to your commentary on the 4th of July and what that could mean for all of us. But I had the actual 4th of July holiday itself was pretty tame. But on Friday after work, we hopped in the car and drove all the way down to Jersey, got there late at night. Now, my fiance, the lovely Tracy, she is a New Jersey native, and so we always stay with her friends down there, a couple of whom the lady is Tracy's high school chum, and we just love staying with them. It's very chill. But it was her, this young lady I mentioned, who is Tracy's high school chum. It was her 40th birthday on Saturday, so that's the reason for driving late into the night on Friday night. We wanted to make sure we were all eyes front and center for this woman's birthday, which was a lot of fun. But man, dude, it was like they had a bartender come, and the bartender, like, they paid for a bartender to like make the drinks. He was like tapping basil on his wrist, if you could picture that. And it was great to have him, but I just didn't want any of the booze at all, man. When I got presented with many like invitations to do shots, and I would like just when everyone else was doing their shot, I just pour mine into the water they gave me as a chaser. Like, I just can't do this. It's just terrible. So I just sipped on a little Coors Light, and that's how I passed the evening. But it was a great time chatting with everyone. One thing that really stuck out in my mind is I ended up having like 4 conversations at this party with people who themselves had been on the tequila shot bandwagon, so they were a little bit, but I had like 4 conversations that ended up, I swear it's not me nudging the conversation this way. You would think that it would be, but and maybe like one of these, it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for my responses. But like the notion that like something is fake about reality, the Platonic idea, or the idea that underlies Platonism, that the realm where you decide to make the fist and the realm where the knuckles actually clench are 2 separate worlds, right? This Platonic dualism. I don't know. It did seem like just taking the temperature of the crowd. These are small data points. It's one group of friends. Who knows what it really means? But it's just interesting to me that people are kind of independently coming to the conclusion that it's not just that the billionaire class, the Epstein class, is running everything based on a power structure that's comprised of like pedophilia, blackmail. So it's like everyone feels like politics is fake, but it seems like people are thinking that reality itself is some kind of fake or production or something like that. People are reaching towards, Platonism was my interpretation, but these people are just sort of, seems like the pattern in history that I always like to bring up here on the Good Old System Failure podcast is that whenever the great empires and the great economic systems crumble and start to come apart, the titanic gears that turn at the hearts of all of these economies that start to seize up and not work so well anymore, well, people just start taking a look at not just their rulers, but the things their rulers have told them about reality, the things the authorities tell us about reality are true. And I don't know, man, it just felt like a different, I don't know if like everyone who I know is like a liberal, politically speaking, but like, I think for that particular subset of the population, the whole war in Gaza thing, the whole war in Iran and like the Gaza and Israel thing really maybe has had them all like kind of throw up their hands and say, I've had it. That meme of Jerry Seinfeld in the movie theater where he just can't take another, he's holding up his hands in disgust and waving the white flag and, leaving the movie early. It seemed kind of like that in some ways. So I don't know. It was interesting to get out there and get out of Maine and just mix with other groups of people and see where their minds are at. And I was very interested that this notion that reality is some kind of a stage production really was resonating with people. And I just to give you a hint, we weren't talking in terms of Platonism, but I was talking to some girl, Trace and I both were, about her like alien abduction experiences and like all of this wild stuff. So this is like the level of fake reality we're talking about. She had some wild stories about being abducted as a kid.
Yeah. So what was her alien abduction story?
When she was like a kid, she had these like night terrors and had all these memories of getting dragged out of bed. And her parents like gaslit her. Like they didn't want her going around being like, talking about how she'd been abducted by aliens. So they like pretended it didn't happen. But she has these clear memories. And like apparently, I've heard this before. And her story matches this pattern of testimony. Once they get you as a kid, like once you've been abducted, like they're in contact with you for life. She keeps having run-ins with them. She keeps having these weird like black spots in her memory. She really seemed like it was like really adjacent to those people who talk about being like kidnapped by the government or something and having chips put in there. But it was really wild. Excuse me, I just had a drink there. And her in her final, it's like there's some element of this where if you're inside of a cube, like you're inside of a room, right? You think that you're, from our three-dimensional perspective, you are inside the room and you can't see out and you have privacy, you think. But in the fourth dimensional, well, let's say four spatial dimensions plus a temporal dimension, so 5D. It's like the Tesseract in that movie Interstellar. And at this point in the conversation, I actually brought up the movie Interstellar and the Tesseract, right? And how Matthew McConaughey in that movie is able, because he transcends 4D space and time, getting sucked into a black hole. He's able to somehow bear witness to his daughter in a room back, many, many years ago when his daughter was young, and he can witness he himself leaving the room to go on his space journey, and he's screaming at himself not to go because you're never gonna get back in time to see your daughter grow up. That's the movie. But this woman had not seen Interstellar. But I was bringing it up because, like, when you are this matches up to like abductions, right? If you think that you were locked secure in a room, but if you have access to trans-dimensional space-time, then you really could reach into a locked box. And here, I always think of Carl Sagan's brilliant presentation on Flatland. Do you remember? Have you ever seen this one, Brian? There's many great YouTube clips. It's from the 1980s Cosmos series hosted by the aforementioned Dr. Carl Sagan. Do you know this video, Brian?
Maybe.
Well, it's like he's got a piece. Carl Sagan's sitting there at a draft board. He's got a big, and he's like he's got characters that are just shapes, and so like Mr. Flatland is just a 2x2 square, that he moves around on this piece of graph paper. And Mr. Flatland's house, it's like two nested rectangles or two nested squares. So the wall is one. The wall is one square thick, and it makes a big square. And then Mr. Flatland can open a door that's two of these little squares, and you can open it and then he can slide in. Am I painting a clear enough picture here, Brian? Maybe not.
I mean, I think so. I mean, it's like, it's the classic, like if you're playing Mario 3 or something, or if you have like a 2D space and you're like, how do you get to like what's inside the vault? It's that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. It's like 2D Mr. Flatland, he thinks he's secure in his living room because he's surrounded by a square, right? But we, who think in terms of cubes and not squares, can see right through his square where he thinks he has privacy. Does that make sense? Like, from a transdimensional perspective, you really could reach into a locked safe and grab the money. And a person who had a perspective disadvantage of being locked in a lower dimension, much in the way that Plato says that we are locked in an emanation from a higher dimension. Well, then that person, it's just like magic. It's just, how can you reach into what appears to be a closed, a closed box or a closed square if you're two-dimensional. It's like Carl Sagan. He cuts an apple in half and he puts it on a stamp pad and he stamps the apple on there's like a blue ink, and now there's a blue ink that's like an infinitely thin cross section of the apple, and he's explaining to the camera that this is how a 2D person would have to view the apple, one thin slice at a time, like an MRI machine, right? You'd have to behold each slice individually and then create a mental model of a 3D image, if you're only two-dimensional, it's impossible to think of all at once. So anyhow, excuse me, that matches like abduction. Like the idea that we live in some kind of a lower dimensional emanation means that when you think you're safe in your bedroom at night with a locked door, really you could be exposed to like an amphitheater of crazy transdimensional beings who can see everything that you're doing. And it kind of makes me think of the old descriptions of Yahweh, the angry God of the Old Testament who knows everything you've done and all of your Pornhub search history or whatever. It kind of reminds me of that. But this is the level on which people seem to be coming to the conclusion that something's up with reality, and we'd ought to be reconsidering some of our assumptions. So it was pretty heady in that degree. So
I don't know what you're supposed to do as a parent if your daughter comes up and tells you that she's being abducted by aliens. I guess I can see how the gaslighting
that's a
happens.
great point. What do you do? If it's real and true, then sweeping it under the rug would be the worst thing you could do for your child psychologically. Trying to pretend it didn't happen, gaslight them, and to be like, oh, it's just some nonsense.
I don't know. I just don't. I mean, especially if you're like, the boomer generation, weren't raised with the internet, you haven't listened to like Kurt Metzger go on about things.
Yeah.
You just have to assume that what you're hearing was craziness and try to stamp it out, basically. Although, I mean, there is like this question of like, do the night terrors beget the alien abduction, or does alien abduction beget the night terrors, or is it just like some kind of like crazy dream? I don't know. You do hear about it happening to people very rarely, but it does seem
Yeah.
to happen.
The other thing I talked to this girl about, the other conversational piece that I like to trot out was this idea that like you don't we I mean, how many times have I told the story of your hide and seek game that didn't go so well when you were like 3, Brian? Because I can remember when you were that age. Because before you identify as a person, right? You don't really have like an ego. You don't have a theory of being a separate. Like babies don't realize they're a distinct entity from their mom. They just learn that after being treated that way for a certain number of years, and you gain facility in the culture. You start to understand the conventions of reality and what things are supposed to mean, and you kind of come to as a person around age 4 or 5 with no memory of what it was like to be a person before that, because before that there was no centralized sense of being a self, right? There is no captain's log without the captain. You need to have the captain first, only then can you have the captain's log. And there's the stories about kids having a brain dump around that age, like you can take your kid to Disney, and you can, when they're 3, and then you can talk to them about it, and remember it for a few years, and then after a while they have like a memory dump. So then when they're 6, they don't remember the trip to Disney anymore when they were 3. I don't know. So it seemed like her abduction was like just at that age, right? It was like it's almost like the kids, and this is a theme of the ancient Egyptians, right? They worshipped the child. They thought that children could see things, much like cats, that children could see things that the rest of us couldn't, and that's why they worshipped the child Horus, who the Greeks called Harpocrates, when they came and settled the Nile Delta there, when the Greek settlers under Alexander the Great did so. And all the Egyptian temples had the statues of a child pointing to his own lips, which is the Egyptian way of pointing out the importance of the babblings of children. And they interpreted that to mean secrecy, because these were all like, the secret societies of ancient Egypt would feature these statues of Harpocrates, or the younger Horus, pointing to his own mouth. And the symbol of putting the finger to the lips then became a symbol of secrecy, and we still have that to this day with the shush symbol. Put the finger to your mouth, but it comes from a misinterpretation of Egyptian iconography on the part of the Greeks there. And so I just wonder, this girl, she had this abduction experience, like, I just wonder if she could see into the manifold, much like Matthew McConaughey can at the end of Interstellar. If she can see into the Tesseract a little bit as a child, and if maybe that is how she got into this abduction scenario. So I don't know. This is all puerile speculation on my part, of course, but there was no denying the great theme of the conversation of that evening was like, something is going on, something is up with reality. So that was wild, and that was only day 1 of New Jersey. The next day we had a wedding, and it was my first ever Jewish wedding. I'd never been to one before, and they did all the things that you would hope that they would do. They crushed the glass, they stomped on the glass, and they hoisted the bride and groom up in the chairs, and they sang the Jewish clergy, the rabbis, did some good singing. And so I don't know. It was, all in all, it was a pretty good
Well, I
take.
can't
I was at
recommend.
that wedding also trying not to have any booze whatsoever, but I do love the dance floor. That's my favorite bit. And of course, I had taken my suit to the cleaners before going to this wedding, because you want to have a nice clean suit for the affair. And that I was like drenched in sweat by the end of the night. It was off the chain. But there was an all-you-can-eat steak, like at like the what do you call it? After the ceremony, there's like some hors d'oeuvres before you go into the ballroom where you have actual dinner. And there was like a prime rib station, and I made the man give me all the fatty bits. He was cutting off of everyone else's prime rib, and it was off the chain until I got like an untoward piece that did not feel great, in the old rum-a-tum tum. But I just kind of soldiered on, and then we went out on the dance floor and danced until we were covered in sweat, as mentioned. And then we went home, and I was like not feeling well. I was like, do I need to vom? I don't. It can't be. I had like no booze at all. What? And and then the next morning I did have to vomit. It was like some mild food poisoning. I was not well for about half a day there. So one of those pieces of steak was not. It was so suspect when I ate it that I threw the rest out. So I knew at the time that I'd eaten something that maybe was untoward. But I was heartbroken the next morning because I was vomiting as if I had drank. But I was a good boy, didn't drink, and I still had the vom. So that was the only dark cloud virtually the whole week, really. And then it was back to work Monday morning. I worked from our friend's kitchen table for the 4 days of the work week this week, and it was crazily busy. And sitting at a kitchen table for 8 hours a day, that is rough on the back. I got to tell you, Brian. Yeah, yes, yeah, yeah. I do have a lift that raises it up to eye level, so at least I got that going for me. But I would say that it's not a kitchen table chair is not a suitable replacement for a real office chair. So my back was pretty sore by the time we got around to Friday. But then we went to Point Pleasant Beach, which is like prime Jersey Shore. It's like 1 or 2 towns up from Seaside, where the Jersey Shore filmed their exciting. You could like walk down to the seaside part. You can see the roller coasters and whatnot. And that was awesome, dude. It was like 95, 98, 99 degrees out there. But we had the good old LL Bean Sunbuster Beach Shelter, and that thing is off the chain when it comes to deflecting the. I mean, they really made it easy. The sea breeze would blow in, but the sun would not get on you. So it was really nice to have that beach shelter. We were there from like 8:30 to like 5 o'clock. It was awesome. So that was lovely, and it felt great to lie on the hard packed sand. That really made my back feel a hell of a lot better. And then yesterday we had just a little 4th of July barbecue. That was a much more muted affair. And then it was back in the car today for 6 hours. And then and now we're doing the podcast just as I got off the road here. So that's been my week. I wonder, Brian, what your little 4th of July was like and how you been doing?
Well, man, I did not do anything too crazy. I mean, people were blowing up some fireworks locally, but that was about the extent of my involvement with the 4th of July. Um, Although, I did have some musings about our country on the 250th anniversary.
Yeah, this is what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, well, you were talking about your friends there, and yeah, how they are becoming, disaffected with the system or what have you. And it is just like I definitely fell for Obama's with a hope and change. So you vote Democrat and hope.
Yeah,
Like,
same.
obviously, that should fix things, right? And then that didn't work out, so I voted for the Donald, and, yeah, man, the Donald's second presidency sure marks, like, the end of any, naivete, I suppose, that anyone could have about, like, what's really going on and whether or not we have any kinda, like, democratic control over our system.
Hmm.
Let's see. I guess I just wanted to share this one thing here in honor of our nation's 250th year. So this is some boomers like this is his house across from a data center, and then just listen to this crazy buzzing that he hears 24/7.
Oh man, okay.
Yeah, so this guy is just on his porch across from this data center here, and it's like 58 decibels. It sounds like something from a horror movie, just playing nonstop.
That's
I
crazy. How
mean,
can they? Man, you would. Yeah, it's no wonder everyone's opposed these data centers.
yeah,
Man,
it's pretty
yeah, it's like
unbelievable. Yeah.
the data centers jack up everyone's electricity price unbelievably, right? You would think that you would think that that the power companies would like force these data centers to like pay their own power bills. I can't believe it. It drives up like the overall demand for electricity and causes people to have their electricity bills blown out. That is insane. And then there's like the problem of sucking up all the water to cool the central processing units that run all these AI queries. And then now there's this crazy buzzing that you were just playing, Brian. It's just like what I just can't believe. I just can't believe that here in Gorham, Maine, there's all kinds of yard signs that say no data centers in Gorham. There's not a data center planned to be here. Amazon's going to make a fulfillment center here, and it does seem like the city councils or whatever the planning boards, whatever the municipal governance is that's supposed to declare what is and what isn't the fit use of land in everyone's individual town. Apparently, they're like all bought, and it's like a corrupt situation. I mean, it's really wild that seems like these data centers are being crammed down the throat of so many Americans. And you were just observing, how much control do we really have over this? Do we have consent of the governed? Do we have taxation but no representation at all? And that really does take us right back to 1776, doesn't it?
It sure does. Well, just about the building of a data center in your local town there. I mean, I just have to imagine that it's worth a lot of money to someone to get these data centers built. I mean, especially since they offload all the costs to run them, like the energy and just take water from the community and whatnot. And so it probably doesn't cost that much to, buy a local town council to get this data center pushed through. In any case,
Yeah, it's got to be chump. Like I feel like if I was a town official, if they're like me financially, like 10K could buy us off. It's like it does not. It seems like it'd be rounding errors. The small amount of money you would need to corrupt a town council, like you're saying.
well,
Yikes,
anyway,
man.
my impression back in like elementary school, like, they teach you about like the history and the founding fathers and whatnot, right? And so basically, what I assumed was that like everyone in England was enslaved and we had like liberty over here in America because we could choose who the president was. And then I think it probably wasn't until like maybe like high school that I learned about like that England, had like the Magna Carta and Parliament, like a bicameral legislature and courts and common law. And that America like was just like basically the same thing built anew, but just with like different people in charge. And that ultimately the Revolutionary War was about, taxation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so you're saying that yeah, you would assume that the revolution was really some radical shift in governance, but actually there's a lot of symmetry between the British system. That's a good observation, and that yeah, in a lot of ways we just set up the same government, but here, and I think that is born. I think a big part of the reason the colonists wanted self-governance was because it was 3 months to get a letter to London, and there was just no way for the king to like if the king dispatched a order that was unpopular, then the person who received the message could just be killed, and you could just pretend you never got the order. But that's really interesting. Yeah, we do have the system we set up here was not this radical new system, right? It was just for like landowners, who were the only ones that were allowed to vote, and so it was just a slight change from the British system, really. So yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you'd have to assume, I guess, that the founding fathers were like honorable men of good intention, but I mean, they are all Freemasons, right? So I'm not really sure
Yes.
what that means. And I don't know, like, when did the currency get like the all-seeing eye, right? It probably didn't start that way in 1776. You don't have any idea on that front, do you?
Yeah, the symbol of the all-seeing eye is definitely much older than 1776. I mean, that's like the Eye of Horus, right? The Egyptian symbol. It goes all the way back to like the ancient Egyptian, secret societies, the secret religion. And like one thing that drove me crazy, like when I went traveling with the aforementioned the lovely Tracy, we had some experience were really strange the way that they stacked up. And one thing that really drove me crazy, well, the first one was we happened to show up in Prague on the anniversary of the 1619 defenestration that touched off the 30 Years' War. And when we got there, it was like just outside that window where like the entire world changed, right? For those who don't know the story, the Bohemia is like the region where Prague is, and that's like the Czech homeland, the Slavic peoples, the Czechs, and they were part of the Holy Roman Empire during the Middle Ages, and they determined, as the Protestant Reformation, tore Europe in half, they determined they wanted to side with the Protestant factions and no longer be Catholic, but that was a big problem for the emperor, the Holy Roman Empire, and so anyway, the matters came to a head when angry Protestant protesters marched into Prague Castle and defenestrated, or threw out of a window, several of the Catholic administrators therein, and they landed in a huge pile of dung and only had a broken leg among them. But the joke is that the pamphlets being churned out by the newfangled printing presses of Europe described the feces as like the God saving grace. The Catholic propaganda was like, well, it was God saving grace, and the Protestant propaganda was like, well, this is the only fitting treatment for Catholics. They should go into dung heaps. Anyway, the entire continent like descended into a horrific war, like the worst. Like between 4 and 8 million people died in the 30 Years' War. It was just a catastrophe. It was the worst thing that. Nothing that bad would happen in Europe until World War One. Why would I be bringing this up? Well, because there is a pyramid just outside the window where all this happened, right? That ultimately the 30 Years' War ended with a treaty that deposed the popes from their position of power over the rest of European geopolitics. And really, it would be the banking houses within 50 short years, who, like, within 50 years of this defenestration, well, the end of the 30 Years' War caused by the 1619 defenestration, it was the 1690s that you had the rise of the Bank of England and the rise of the Freemasons in London at the same time. And just outside the base of this window, there is a pyramid with a copper pyramid cap, like the cap of the pyramid is missing, and it's like the symbol of the all-seeing eye. It's the very same symbol that's on the back of our dollar bill, and there's like a sculpture of it that's right outside the window. And I guess this sculpture was there before the defenestration. I don't know, but it's just so odd to have a place that's so important to European history marked with the very symbol that you brought up there, Brian. And it just makes one wonder how much it can't be a coincidence that it was just a couple years apart that the Freemasons, popped up in London, and also the Bank of England popped up, in London. It's just, it's a lot, and it does seem to me that the upper crust, the superstructure, the authorities went from being the popes to being the bankers in that century, the 1600s. And it's just so odd that the banking houses use the old Egyptian iconography, the magical symbolism, to decorate their money. It's just the craziest thing ever. And it gets right back to the founding of the country. Like you're saying, Brian, all those guys were all Freemasons. And there's like, if Dan Brown's lost symbol is to be believed, the streets of Washington, D.C. are laid out according to what is it, the square and the compass of that is the prime symbol of Freemasonry. I don't know what it is. I don't know what that, how deep the conspiracy goes exactly, but it sure looks odd from the outside.
Well, I guess the all-seeing eye and the pyramid there, but missing the top, was added in 1935 under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Is what the old chat GPT tells
Interesting.
me.
Added to the dollar bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess, I mean, the Federal Reserve was like, I don't know exactly when it started, but it was around the early 1900s,
1913.
right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
so, but I guess the Eye of Providence, I guess it is on the seal, like with the eagle at the top. I guess that's supposed to be it's at least the eye part of the pyramid, the top part.
yeah.
But well,
Is it? I
you
think it's the
do
reverse of the Great Seal of the United States.
the reverse on the dollar, you mean?
Yeah, like the great. No, oh, the Great Seal of the United States. On one side is like the eagle that's clutching the olives and the arrows, and then the other side is like the all-seeing eye or whatever.
I
I think
see.
that's right.
All right.
I could be wrong about that. Let me. In fact, we
Well,
have the internet, Brian. Why don't I look it up right now and just make sure I'm getting that right? Great Seal of the United States. Yep. Yeah, the reverse has the pyramid and the Eye of Providence on the Great Seal. Yep, yeah, that's exactly right. You can pull it up on Wikipedia. It is not controversial.
all right. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you do have to wonder because, like, I mean, the crazy story about, like, well, we do deify our founding fathers. Well, the crazy story about the tree, right? It's like this made up
Yes, yeah,
fable. And then, well, there's this whole thing where, yeah, so we think we have agency as a people over the way our society is run. But clearly, what we've come to learn, right, is that we have extremely little agency in the past,
yeah.
2 decades or going back to 9/11, right? And so it's like the ultimate ruse. And so I don't know, like, was that like the idea from the outset? Was it for like, was that part of this new project was to like make people think they had liberty? And but I guess America was like, isolationist. Although the 1800s sound like a crazy time of like robber barons and
Yeah.
whatnot. So I think it's probably been crazy the whole time. So anyway, I think yes, we have to be like there's one like singular political issue that matters, and it's like transparency, right? Like I really don't think that like a libertarian versus like a communist model matters nearly as much as like transparency, right? I don't know, like Dave Smith was going on his podcast again about like the glories of libertarianism and why he's right and everyone else is wrong. And I just don't see, well, I mean, obviously if there's no government, like having no government doesn't even make sense because government's like the coalescing of power. And like, I don't know, that's what I don't understand about the libertarian model.
Yeah, well, no,
And,
I listened to that same podcast, and to your point, I love how they preen about how right they are, and but then they proceed to just spout like, I mean, the things that they're saying are just so easily destroyed. I'm like, man, this is low hanging fruit. Like the myth of barter is a good one. You could just annihilate that. It's just no argument against like this idea that before money people bartered. It's not true. You just kind of borrowed a cup of sugar from your neighbor and you owed them one. It was a social relation instead of a purely economic one. But it's designed to make it seem like markets are this quasi-natural phenomenon where government's only job is to intrude on it, and that's just a silly ideology. It can be easily disproven. But to your point, Brian, my big takeaway is like I think their economics are quaint and hilarious, but we still agree on every major issue. And so why are we spending time arguing about these fantastical free markets when we should be against endless foreign wars and against bank bailouts and against the for prosecution of the Epstein offenders? So your point is well taken that this whole communism versus libertarian thing, it's just a sideshow to keep us from actually disciplining our billionaire class.
yeah, man, like, yeah, transparency, dude. It certainly seems like, basically all the issues could be solved. I don't know, like, I was thinking about, like, there's, like, the farm analogy, right?
What's the
We
farm
are kinda
analogy?
like, yeah, work animals, like, on a yeah, well, we're like work animals on a farm, basically, and, the people in charge, profit off of our labor, and and obviously the beasts of the farm have like no real conception of the things that go into running a farm, like, paying taxes and doing administration and whatnot. And I guess, it would be shocking if you were like a sheep or something to learn that, your life has, well, you're going to get murdered for meat at some point. And like maybe, the farm creates a net increase in the quality of life for the sheep. And then rather being like taken down by wolves, they are slaughtered relatively humanely. And that could be a net upside. But the problem is like when the farm like degrades the quality of life for its sheep because I don't know, it has to go for a war or get into a war with resources with its neighboring farm community, and then it turns out that the farm owners are have an affinity for grape soda in pizza and jerky and some extremely suspicious leaks.
That's hilarious.
The things. things start to break down, and I don't know, that's where we are as like a sheep, right? And so, yeah,
Yeah,
man,
that
I
is
mean,
a
just the utter lack of transparency is terrible. I'm like a manager at an insurance company. I think what would be well, you've talked, Nate, before about how what you'd like to see is well, the workplace is the last democratized place, and I think democracy in the workplace, well, that would be good. If, like people should know like how much the CEOs make and what people like every position make, and that should all be like transparent, right? I don't know. So I don't really know if like the workers need to be able to like vote on who the management is and whatnot, but it should absolutely be like transparent like how much everyone gets paid, right? Like, why is that not the case? I mean, I guess it's because it's good for the people who make all the money, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, Brian. I do think the convention where you're not supposed to it is I think it's even true to say that it's federally protected, the right to discuss your paycheck with your coworkers, that you can't be like fired for that or disciplined for that. I believe that's true, or maybe that's a state thing, or maybe I'm totally mistaken, but I thought your farm analogy was just so perfect. It really is like it made me think of how like the sheep if as long as the farm is being run at least to benefit the sheep, at least if there's some benefit to being like a tax cattle, as we may be and probably are, then no one really questions it. We can go along with it if it's benefiting us, right? It's when things start breaking down, they stop benefiting us, that people start to question the things the farmers have told them. And that was the great theme of my birthday party, my friend's birthday party last weekend. And I also like I do think that like economic relations really, class relations, it really is like a giant tower. Like for example, like a pregnant teenager who has to mine cadmium, in the mines of Angola to make iPhones. Right, that person leads such a depraved existence. Like I reckon that they couldn't comprehend of our existence any more than we can any more than we can understand what it's like to be, the aforementioned pregnant teenager mining lithium or cadmium or cobalt or whatever it is that they need to make these batteries. So there's like we can sort of glimpse the existence of the horrifying existence of the people lower than us in the economic hierarchy, and we can sort of glimpse the people directly above us, right? Like Elon Musk, who has this $1 trillion. But is Elon Musk the richest man in the world? Well, no, we've said it many times on this podcast. He's the richest person who's had the misfortune of having to open their books to the public because they own all these public companies, right? So we can see there's this big economic tower, this big hierarchy, excuse me, and we're somewhere in between, like we're somewhere in the middle, and we can see the level directly above us, and we can see the direct level directly below us, but we can't guess we can't guess our relative position in the tower. How high does it go? How low does it go? Like where are we really? And this hierarchy of levels, really, this is Platonic language again. Like this idea that you could ascend. This idea of the Platonic ascent to like how do you say, transcend this three-dimensional illusion we live in. And the thing that this economic hierarchy it makes me think of is like the Nephilim from the Bible, like these stories of like angels coming down and impregnating human women and giving birth to a race of hybrids that's in the book of Genesis chapter 5, or the race of giants that apparently inhabits the earth according to some of these wild old chapters in Genesis. And I just wonder, like, there must be a lot more going on here than we can see from our limited vantage point. And I think the people directly above us are trying to shield us. This is what I think the curtailment of the Epstein files really is. They're trying to shield us from finding out what's really up above. And this is where I think the angels and demons and the UFOs come in. These are, literal ascents and descents as described in the Bible, where, Mary goes directly up to heaven, or Jesus, after he's resurrected, bodily rises to heaven. I mean, I just think that and the fact that the UFOs are all in the sky, 2 years ago over New Jersey, it was well documented. All those wild lights that, and it seems like the ruling class just wants to be like, nothing to see here, move along. But I think it all does go back to economics. I think now of the Zachariah Sitchin thesis about the Anunnaki, the supposed star people that was written in the ancient Babylonian texts, and his idea, Brian, which you introduced me to, is that we're all we are spliced monkeys, primates spliced with some kind of alien genetic program that gives us this strange compulsion to organize all the gold on Earth and put it away in vaults where in its purest form, where they can maybe come and be claimed by the aliens. Maybe it's their spaceship fuel or a metal they value for some reason, but for whatever we think we're going to work to feed our families, but really what we're doing is compiling all this gold for the benefit of some alien species that genetically engineered us. Now that's some wild tinfoil hat material, But it just makes me think about the fact that we are tax cattle, like you said, and that we're all, it's easy to accept whatever the version of reality is on offer from the authorities when things are working well. But when they don't work well, or like you said it, like when the farmer stops taking care of his cattle, well, that's when people start to ask some serious questions. Eh?
Yeah, man, I think that is the case. Yeah, I don't know, like, what the future has in store. Yeah, it's just hard to imagine anything like it just seems like a race to the bottom at this point, right? I mean, how can you have like any faith in like we've just done the hope and change on like both sides of the political aisle, and I mean, I guess there's maybe some hope in that Mom Donnie's
That's
democratic
it.
socialist movement is seems to be catching on. And then, well, I mean, the libertarians or Tucker Carlson or someone should run a right leaning party that is not the Republicans, and, that would be fantastic, right? So, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some hope in that way, but
Yeah, yeah. There's been a whole slate of like socialist candidates that are winning in like Colorado and New York that are endorsed by like the Mamdanis, and that gives me a lot of. It feels like 2020, Brian. Remember when Bernie Sanders won the Nevada primary? I was like, all right, finally, we can get some of the programs we need to just keep the economy running, so that we don't run out of money and run out of available credit, and then can no longer service the economy. That's the collapse we'd like to not have to live through if we could possibly manage it. And like the only that's why I think that like a Bernie Sanders program, it's a stopgap solution. But I mean, it's like what we have now is communism just for the rich. All these endless wars and bank bailouts and tax cuts. So we just need to break off some of that communism and apply it to regular people so that we don't lose the entire country. And apparently that's too tall an order for either of our venerable legacy parties, the R's and D's. And so, Brian, I am just totally with you. I think that we got to transcend the R and D paradigm that does nothing but keep us going around in these various rhetorical cul-de-sacs, and instead, put our hope and faith in the manifold glories of communism, or whatever, whatever the thing is that we need to do. We can hash out those details later,
transparency.
but that's it. We need to regain control over the system. It's exactly right, Brian. What a great way to put it. Yeah, man. Yeah, well, that's I see. I think that maybe there's some, maybe the numerology of year 250 or something can come into play here, and maybe everyone's feeling, a little bit deflated. Your Fourth of July address, Brian, feels deflated to me. Would you say that's an accurate characterization? Is that how you feel?
Deflated.
Discouraged, let's say.
Yeah, well
Pessimistic.
yeah, well, let's see. Yeah, I guess the overall sentiment is like, good luck everyone, because 'cause you're effed. So, yes.
Well, man, yeah, there was definitely some excitement. Obviously, New Jersey is adjacent to, we're right there outside of New York City, and so there were some members of the birthday party on Saturday who were very excited about Mayor Mamdani and his slate of down ballot socialist candidates, not just in New York but nationwide. And I don't know, I thought that felt exciting. It's the deep cut taxes on the rich neoliberal version of the Democrats proved to be like really divisive, I think, and just not really. I think it was engineered to be such one of these cul-de-sacs that just keeps us going round and round in circles and doesn't get us any closer to regaining control over the renegade structures of power that rule our lives, Brian, that you pointed out there.
Well, yeah, it's 100% a pointless distraction to, further entrench the uniparty and, yeah, keep the, infighting among the plebs, replete.
It does seem like, just going back to the founding, it does seem like the fight over the central bank was like a, that's why that's why Alexander Hamilton has his hip hop Broadway play, right? Because he was the big proponent of the central bank early on, and there was the first Bank of the United States and then the second one. But these banks, I guess, were like unpopular or unstable, or they proved not to be as advertised. Obviously, there's Andrew Jackson's legendary dying words, where he's supposed to have said, "Well, at least I beat the bank," and that was the last thing he said. Beat the banks. He beat the first president from the frontier, which then meant Tennessee, made it his mission to not allow the bank to come and not allow like a central bank to come and take over the colonies there. There was like I guess the original colonies were like slave plantations in the south and mercantilist shipping hubs in the north, and that's, yeah, I guess that was like the first version of America, but I think there must have been some idealism baked in, Brian. To your point, do you think that you were asking earlier, did the founding fathers, were they idealists, were they good people, or was it all just about how we're gonna whack up the money here? And I mean, I gotta think there's an argument to be made for both. Like probably both are true to some extent. Isn't that usually the way things are versus being black and white? There's some kind of a gray area. But I guess what I'm getting at here, is there anything like what's the most positive thing about America that we can appreciate? Maybe it doesn't come from the political structure. And I think of America, I think about like barbecues and Friday Night Lights and things of this nature. I guess politically, the things I really like about America are the freedom of speech thing and the Second Amendment, the firearms thing. Those seem like they are very unique and are not the case in merry old England. So that's one important distinction between our system and the British system, eh, Brian?
Oh, yeah, those are fair points. Yeah, I mean, those are certainly solid inclusions, something we can rely on. I mean, we don't have any healthcare or lots of other issues. But,
Right, but when
yeah, I mean, those are, I mean, there's definitely some good things about America. Yeah, certainly, like, the people, mostly pretty good when we're not getting stirred up into some kind of, like, race war or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, right.
barbecues, yeah, football, bad things.
It terrifies me that even in Canada, across the border, up in Canada or in the UK, as you mentioned, Brian, like the government can just call down the newspaper and kill any story that they deem fit. I mean, that's just terrifying. And similarly, I think it was. I mean, it does seem like if the forever wars in the Middle East have taught us nothing, have taught us anything, it's that people with small arms who really are interested in defending their territory are insurmountable even by the finest, most expensive militaries the empire can muster. So I think that the both the Second Amendment with its firearms and the First Amendment with its guarantee of freedom of speech, those are going to be huge assets. Like this is a huge advantage we have in America that other Western countries do not have. And when it comes to elbowing the renegade pilots out of the cockpit and taking control of the plane again, I feel like these are going to be indispensable tools for getting that accomplished. Eh?
Yeah, I mean, those are fair points. Yeah, I mean, well, just to go on about the doom and gloom, man, it's it's just that like it's just so I don't know. Like one thing like ChatGPT, I was putting my thoughts together for that bit on America, and I was just saying how there's like these extremely questionable emails with the aforementioned, grape soda and beef jerky and pepperoni
Yeah.
pizza parties. And ChatGPT was saying that what I was insinuating was I don't know. What did it say? Hang on. Hang on. It said that these are extraordinary allegations. Publicly released Epstein related documents have revealed disturbing associations, but they have not established claims like the one you're implying. Well, I mean, I didn't really specifically say what I'm implying, although, I feel like, I mean, it's not like Epstein was arrested for having relations with overage women.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And then so I just had to, like, go into the Epstein Files logs and search for beef jerky and pepperoni pizza and grape soda and try to figure out if it's exactly as horrifying as I remember. And yes, it is.
Yeah.
There's people talking about how if you'll accept, like, this kind of payment, we'll have, like, a grape soda and pizza party. Like, oh my god. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just all the mythology about about our country, and we have these ideas, like, I don't know, well, I don't know, like Sam Harris and Gad Saad are like, yeah, man, those Muslims, man, those guys are a problem, dude. They are godless heathens and chucking gay people off of roofs and whatnot. And it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, have you read these Epstein files, man? Like, we just absolutely lack any kind of moral. Like, we have the worst people. They talk about those people in Afghanistan, yeah, who like I don't know, they just have sex with young boys or something.
Yeah.
The mullahs or something. I don't know
The
if
T
you
boys,
heard
yeah,
these tales.
it's part of their cultural thing. Yeah, the T boys or whatever that they just kind of get used as playthings. Absolutely brutal. But I mean, the Epstein files puts it all to shame, doesn't it? To your point, Brian.
It sure does. Yeah, and it's just so I don't know, like yeah, just our politicians are just so like such transparently like lizard people, man. I don't. It's not great. Dude, I'll never forget when Hillary Clinton like passed out and had to be like carried. She was just like slumped
Yeah,
over,
that
and
was
they
an
were carrying her into
insane
that
moment.
van. What a great moment in American history that was. Not talked about enough, I would say.
Yeah, man. It does seem like, but it does seem like people aren't going to be able to move past the Epstein files, and that it's a bridge too far. I do. There was a whole the Justice Department's refusing again this week to release the Epstein files, citing some kind of like wanting to protect the victims or something like that. That we all know is a load. So it does seem like it's not going away. Like it's just too much. Like they've reached the limit of what they can sweep under the rug. It feels like the bubble could burst. I don't know. I mean, yeah, yeah. It sure is the most
Well,
depraved
I
possible thing, which I'm sure it's
I
designed to
think
be.
I think these Epstein files are like a dam, like holding back some crazy truth, basically, about our whole system in the matrix in which we live.
Yes,
Is what it comes down to. One good thing that's going on. Our boy Roger Waters was on the Jimmy Dore show,
I
and
didn't see that.
there's some court. Yeah, there's some court case in London where someone who died in 9/11 It's like his brother, and they're trying to get like the court to actually address this matter, basically, is what it is. And so, yeah, Roger Waters was saying how like he didn't like want to talk about 9/11 back in the day because he sounded like an absolute kook. But now the times have changed. And he was saying how the people in charge are trying to like kill us all. And I don't know. He's trying to raise money for this thing. And man, that would be crazy if we like to actually get some transparency about 9/11. That'd be wild if something like that came to pass.
That'd be
It's
a
gonna be
hell of a peek.
crazy if that dam ever breaks open, man. It's really gonna be wild.
Yep, that's what I was gonna say. It'd be a hell of a peek behind the curtain to find out what's the real story with 9. Why was there another building that collapsed in Manhattan? Why was this guy Larry Silverstein taking out massive insurance policies like days before for like the twin towers that he like owned, like, that he had bought? Like, why are there BBC reporters announcing the collapse of Building 7 before it actually collapses? I mean, there's just so many weird things about it. I got no idea. It does seem. It's either just a calamity that was convenient for the ruling regime to install the Patriot Act and get us into war in the countries that. The Middle Eastern countries that benefit Israel, or I mean, was it engineered to some degree? I mean, it is odd that Al Qaeda is sort of an American creation in the sense that we funded Osama bin Laden and the Mujahideen in their fight against the Soviets in the 1800s. Excuse me, in the 80s, not the 1980s, not the 1800s. It is like, yeah, and it's just, and they've got this Al Jalali character who now runs Syria, who I guess was part of ISIS back in the day. There's this whole, like, I mean, it's like it's like that George Orwell quote that the war, the foreign war is really a war waged by the ruling class against its own people to keep them trapped within this system that benefits the ruling class. And man, yeah, I do think you're right. 9/11 is like a major, well, it was a major turning point. It's like the birth, it's like the birth of this crazy version of America, and that would really be a great example of like getting to see how the stage platforms actually work. How reality is really generated for our communal consumption. Yeah. That would be like, maybe the Epstein files would be number one. Maybe some 9/11 transparency would be number two. There is just one last element on the Epstein files I didn't mention earlier that I should hear, Brian. I do think there's going to be a relationship between UFOs and what's on those Epstein files, and because the Epstein himself was so concerned with gravitation and physics and had opened that ranch out in New Mexico, and was interviewing all the prominent physicists, like Stephen Hawking, the guy in the wheelchair. So I just feel like whatever is behind the stage is going to have something to do with angels and demons and UFOs and economic exploitation, and the only way that we're gonna be able to progress as a species is to come together and link arms, even with the libertarians with their very humorous economic views, and maybe use the First Amendment and the Second Amendment as weapons ammo in our arsenal, at least here in the good old U.S. of A. And see if we can't make something of a phoenix from the ashes here. See if we can't rescue this thing from the fire. I mean, I think that. I don't know, just the prevalence of the Iran war and Israel and Epstein files, and even of 9/11. To your point about 9/11, Brian, it does seem like they just can't sweep any more under the rug, and it's time for the counter reaction. And maybe the political trajectories of the career of Mr. Mamdani and his band of merry socialist pirates is the first sign that the wind's starting to blow in the right direction.
Well, I think the connection between the Epstein files and the UFOs. I mean, I don't know, but what I would guess is that there's like a cult of, or a small brotherhood or a small band of people who are, I don't know. Well, they certainly like they think they're from Atlantis or whatever, and there's probably have the technology passed down. In any case, they've stripped themselves of their souls through demonic ritual, and now are out to feed on the souls of the rest of us. I think is probably the connection.
Yeah,
Although I
man.
think the good news is that there's probably countervailing positive forces. So hence the battle between angels and demons.
Yeah. Yeah, the better angels of our nature, as Mr. Abraham Lincoln was fond of saying. Yeah, I do think that we are going to be able to link, like most people, most of us are to the point where we can't tolerate the Epstein files or similar shenanigans and skullduggery and cloak and dagger. And I think the time is coming close to link arms and to fix what's obviously become a rotten, corrupt system. I will say that I think there's something to human nature, like the cheetah sits in the baobab tree all day long, conserving energy because it's roiling hot on the grasslands of the Serengeti, and they don't want to waste their energy doing anything other than just getting the gazelle and bringing it to the ground. And so, there's very much of a calorie preservation thing going on there. And I wonder if we have the like narratives are that way for humans, right? We just will not be satisfied unless Luke Skywalker almost loses out to Darth Vader, right? For whatever reason, the reality, the shape of the story we prefer is one where the bad guys almost win, and then the good guys, manage to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And so let us hope that that archetype applies to the narrative that we are all living out here, and that, even though things have really gotten to a eyebrow-raising state of decay and depravity, that maybe we can, as I said, make something of a phoenix from the ashes and pluck this whole project of Western civilization out of the fire before it all goes down in flames and the ship sinks without a trace, if you pardon my many metaphors there.
Well, if we didn't have any adversity, I suppose life would be pointless, huh?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I do. I can't help but feel hopeful, and I hope to infect you with my optimism, Brian, on this the day after our country's 250th anniversary. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we don't want to deify the founding fathers or believe too much in our own mythology, but at least we can, at least we can use the apparatus of the First and Second Amendment and hope that those are sufficient, to overcome whatever it is we're facing here.
All right. Yeah, I think, well, you just need transparency to, you can't like lie to yourself about what the state of affairs is. And so the set of facts, I mean, they just kind of are what they are. And so I don't know.
I
Well,
think transparency should be the name of this episode because I think that's it. Like until we have a map of the territory, we can't navigate without a map. We need some kind of a model of what we're looking at here, and but at least we've gone to the point where most people agree that the current system is beyond redemption. At least everyone knows we need a new map.
sure.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Brian. Well, we are just about up to an hour here, and as mentioned at the top of the pod, I'm in a state of extreme exhaustion, so I think we'll go ahead and sign off for the week. But I will say that we hope that you all will see fit to join us over at systemfailure.org. There you can, of course, sign up to read the weekly essays written by yours truly, though those essays come out every single Sunday morning, and if you sign up with your email address, you can never have to worry about missing one. Additionally, if you want to inject some hope or optimism, or let us know what you think, or maybe you have some pessimistic points we missed here, you can get in touch with Brian or myself at systemfailure.org simply by clicking on the About page and then the appropriate name. Okay, well, I will be back on Thursday with the weekly audio essay read, and then Brian, you and I will be back at it again next week with the venerable System Failure listeners. Can't wait to talk to you all then. Hope you're having a great week.
All right. See you, folks.